I'm going to do a share screen and recording in progress. Here we go. So this is Rabbi Herzog's letter about the Zohar for us today, more or less. It's unpublished, but here you have it. Ba'asher l'shelat Sefer HaZohar mi yelado. Who gave birth to the Zohar? Harei ze davar she'alav nichtav kol kach harbe. So much has been written about this. U'v'dorot ha'achronim tiplu baze b'muchad ha'geonim ha'mekubalim. Rabbi Dr. Herzog is very interesting. I mean, he was born in Lomza in Poland. His father, Reb Leib, had various positions in Leeds in the United Kingdom, also in Paris. And the young Yitzchak Isaac was quite a genius and spent time after he was about 10 or so. He was born in 1887, and in 1897, the family started to wander to Leeds, to London, and to Paris. He picked up several degrees on the way. Also a smicha from Reb Meir Simcha Kohen of Dvinsk, and from the Ridbaz, Rabbi Velensky. From 1915 to 1936, he was a rabbi in Ireland, chief rabbi of Ireland. 1937, at Rabbi Cook's recommendation, he was invited to be the chief rabbi of what was then Palestine. And of course, the famous quip is that after he had done a tour here and showed all the yeshivas that he was a much greater Gaon than any of them, or that they had, Pikuchinsky wrote him a letter and said, Rabbi Herzog will be happy to support you as chief rabbi and not Rabbi Zavulon Charlap, but please give back your 3 PhDs. So that's the story there. Anyhow, so Rabbi Herzog, who is firmly entrenched both in the world of the Lithuanian yeshivas and the rabbinic leadership, and also an academic pioneer in the study of the mollusk that from which the tchela dye was obtained, he says, look, recently, that is in the 19th century, Rabbi David Luria and Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac Chaver of Suwalk, who we talked about last week, they all wrote Shnehem Sfarim La'agen al Kadmut HaZohar. They all wrote defending the authenticity of the Zohar. It is Rashbi. לדעתי, יש להבחין בין השיטה הכופרת לגמרי בסודות התורה, האומרות שאין בתורה אלא פשוטו של המקרא בלבד. Rabbi Herzog says, look, anybody who says that the Torah is only what it means superficially, there's nothing spiritual underneath the words of the Torah, is a heretic. As far as orthodoxy is concerned, השיטה מודה בסודות התורה, אלא שהיא אינה מודה שהזוהר אפילו בחלק הוא מרבי שמעון ben Yochai. But somebody who says the Torah contains deep mysteries, but Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai didn't write the Zohar, השיטה הראשונה ברור לי שהיא חופשית גמורה, כלומר אפיקורסית, דעת מינים. רבותינו חכמי המשנה והתלמוד והתנאים והאמוראים ז"ל, ודאי שהאמינו בכל לבבם ונפשם שהתורה מלאה סודי סודות בכל אות ובכל תג. The rabbinical approach is that the Torah is full of stuff, and it's much more than meets the eye. Just think about Rabbi Akiva, who was able to doresh tilei tilin shel halachot, mounds and heaps of halachot from the letters of the Torah and the crowns on the Torah. In other words, everything has many, many, many deep levels. If you're not sharing that belief, then you're not really within the bounds of what we would call frum orthodoxy. Okay, וזה, line 11, לא רק בנוגע לחוקים שהתורה כוללת סודות, מסתורין, but also refers to separate Torah. The stories of the Torah also are more than mere stories or historical accounts. For example, we have Maaseh Bereshit and Maaseh Merkavah. Maaseh Bereshit is based on the story of creation. Maaseh Merkavah is the story of God's chariot as the Navi Cheskel saw it. But we read a lot more into it. And then, of course, Rabbi Herzog says that the Kabbalists find a lot of mysteries and secret ideas in these stories, and that's fine, okay? And the Zohar is a particular example of plumbing the depths of the Torah to uncover the secret meaning. And if you look on line 15 in the middle, Hashem Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai ba'atzmo, Oy lahem labriot, Omer Rashbi, she'enam ro'im b'Torah ela et hasipurim hachitzonim. Next Shiur we'll read Zohar. We'll read Zohar, and we'll read this particular extract. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai said that, of course, every story in the Torah is surface and there's the inner depth. Shem bibchinat halevushim laguf, v'aguf eino ela bibchinat levush laneshama. It's like clothes covering the body. The words of the stories of the Torah cover a deeper meaning. אבל אם אתה מתחיל לפרש הסיפורים בדרך משל ונמשל, ונדרש הנעלם ובזוהר עצמו, ההיסטוריה של עם ישראל להיכן הלכה. What does that mean? Translate that line 18. If we follow the Zohar, particularly Midrash HaNe'elam, which is the hidden midrashim on all the psukim in the Torah, and in the Zohar itself, which is basically a commentary on the Torah, what does that phrase "Historia shel Am Yisrael leheichan halcha" mean? Anybody like to translate? We don't want to wait too long. We have a football match to watch. Historia shel Am Yisrael, the history of the Jewish people, leheichan halcha, what is going to become of it? The question Rabbi Herzog asked is, we have history in our Torah. Are we going to ignore it entirely and replace history with symbols and mystical ideas, and ideas, however profound they may be, of connecting to God? Surely we must still give value to the plain meaning of the text. Now, this is a fundamental philological, philosophical, and theological problem. There is a deeper meaning. But how do we bridge between the deeper meaning and the plain meaning? Now, Rabbi Herzog says, I'm going to have to deal with this at a later date, okay? And he also has written something or the other, but I'm going to skip the next couple of lines and say that Baram, third line from the end of line 21. What he says, they're going to make a distinction between stories that are clearly theological, like Moshe speaking to God, and God saying, you can see my back, not my front. That's clearly mystical and full of deeper meaning. But other things are not. Lefi divrei Zohar v'hamekubalim bichlal. According to the Zohar and the Kabbalists in general, הדורשים למשל את הפרשה שבתורה על דבר מלכי אדום, על שבירת הכלים וכדומה. What do you do about the Zohar? It talks about the kings of Edom. How many kings of Edom are mentioned in Parashat Vayishlach?
8.
8, thank you. Before there was a Melech B'Israel, there were 8 kings in Edom. Now, each of them dies, Vayimloch tachtav, and then another king comes in his place, correct? Now, you may remember that one of those kings was Bela ben Beor. What's Bela? Is that a good name or a bad name? Bela, bad. Bilam ben Beor, Bilam. Beor is a bad name. So what do we learn from this, says the Zohar? A whole story, okay? And I'm going to read, I'll translate into English from the Midrash HaNe'elam on what this story of 8 kings ruling over Edom before there was a king of Israel, what it means. It means that God created worlds before our world, and each of these worlds had to be destroyed because each of them was bad. There were bad things in them because they didn't have the right balance between rachamim and din, mercy and strict law. Balance between mercy and strict law is what the 10 Sefirot do. Establish the correct balance. So the Torah, apparently, in giving us a list of 8 kings, is really trying to tell us about Kabbalah and Sefirot. The Zohar cites the famous Midrash in Bereshit Rabbah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Borei Olamot Umacharivan. God destroyed worlds. These are the 8 worlds that he destroyed. Before there was a king in Israel, before this Sefirot system became harmonious, Jewish people do tefillah and mitzvot with the right kavanah intention. They bring unity into their own bodies, their own souls. That unity impacts on the higher realms, connecting us to God in heaven, to the Ein Sof, and that's the perfect world. And talks about the mighty of mighties, that the all-present is able to bring order out of confusion. Everything in the Torah is a code. Remember, it says that there was a king, that the name of his city was Dinhava. Remember?
Mm-hmm.
Now, what is Dinhava? Dain Haveh. We have to bring now the element of Chesed to balance the element of Din, which is the evil element represented by Bela ben Baor. Okay? And then there's a pasuk in Mishle that is interpreted. So in the end, what the Zohar says is that the whole story of the 8 kings is in fact a message about the 10 Sefirot, how we have to find a balance, and worlds that have no balance have to be destroyed. Well, what do you think about that? Says Rabbi Herzog. Does that really mean that we have to forget all the historical details? Do you remember how the Rambam in the Moreh Nevuchim, Chelek Gimel, Perek Nun, explained the passage about the kings of Edom? Let me refresh your memory. Rambam says that we need them because they teach us a message. All of these kings were actually not Bnei Edom. They were foreigners. Matred, Mezahav, they all came from different places. They ruled over the Edomites and were nasty to them. So the Torah says, "Lo tuchad latet alecha ish nochri." You may not appoint a non-national over you, because that's what was done by these people. And this is the message that we learn. Why is this pasuk in the Torah important? In fact, the question of why are all sorts of apparently non-helpful details of Israelite history or history of the ancient Near East important? It's a question that the Gemara asks in Masechet Chulin, Daf Samech, Amar Reish Lakish. They are bits of the Torah, haroyim lisaref. You think they should be burned. Why are they there? This week's parsha is a good example. What we learned in this week's parsha, that the territory of Moab was conquered by who? Sichon. Avadata and Chemosh. Okay, Ar and Chemosh, the gods of Moab, have been overthrown by Sichon. Why do we need to know that? What answer does the Gemara give? Amar Rav Papa, Ba Sichon v'tziheret Moab. Bnei Israel occupied Sichon's territory, correct? Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Yeah.
But were Bnei Israel allowed to take territory from Moab or Ammon? The answer is
No.
no. Says so in the book of Dvarim. So how could they take the territory of Moab and Ammon that had been conquered by Sichon? Answer is a principle of halachic international law. If you conquer, you acquire sovereignty. So Moab and Ammon, who are beyond the purview of Bnei Israel, they were no longer Moab and Ammon. They were territory of Sichon. Sichon was an Emori, and therefore Bnei Israel were allowed to fight Sichon, to fight Og, and take the territory that once belonged to Moab and Ammon. And of course is the Haftarah, which is very interesting. The king of Ammon says, I want my land back. And Yiftach says, you're 300 years too late. That's also a principle. But it's interesting that after the War of Independence, Rabbi Pesach Frank and Rabbi Meir ben Sion Chai Uziel argued over what was to be done with vineyards and olive plantations that had been left by Arabs who had fled. They had either been the owners or had been working there. They'd fled. To whom do these vineyards and olive plantations belong? Pesach Frank said it's very simple. Kibush, conquest, does create sovereignty. And it now becomes Jewish land. Rabbi Uziel said, as Sephardic chief rabbi, but we should think about the Arabs who left in panic. We should keep these areas for them in case they return. Now, I'm not going to go into the what is very close to a political issue, but this is just to show you that we do look for deeper meanings in what are apparently historical points. Rambam is rational. The Gemara is very interesting. In fact, this is a rule. This is a Roman law rule that if you have, I think it's called debellitium. If you're able to conquer territory in war, it's yours. And until after World War II, was generally recognized that if you conquered, you took. The Allies who won in the First World War in Versailles, they took German territory. Nobody argued. It's only since World War II that international law in general has become biased against sovereignty by conquest. But for hundreds, if not thousands of years, this was international law, and this is the halakha. So we can see that there would be importance in history. Rambam tells us why the kings of Edom are important, because we learn, don't appoint somebody who isn't an Israelite. So Rabbi Herzog says, should we go with a Kabbalah and denude the historical episodes of all historical meaning and say, no, they are mysteries of Torah? He's not very happy with that. So he says this is something that we're going to have to think about. And so he says, line 22, וכדומה, ואין צריך לומר על הפרשיות שבמעשה בראשית, יש לנו להתבונן מהו היחס של הפשט לדרוש הסודי. Very important line. We have to think carefully about the right balance between pshat and the secret message. There may be secret messages. Many of our Gedolim found secret messages. Kabbalah certainly did. But we still have to maintain a sense of what the details of the Torah mean in the literal sense. Okay? הרי זה עניין שלא עוצב עוד כל צורכו. We haven't really plumbed the depths of this. עוד אני עתיד אם ירצה השם לדון בזה ברוחב ובעומק. I hope, God willing, to deal with this. But of course, he never got round to that. Life was too busy as chief rabbi and as a posek. But this is a very fundamental question. Kitzro shel davar, line 25. הדעה האומרת שהתורה כפשוטה ממש, אף על פי שאינה כופרת בגלוי בעיקרון של תורה מן השמיים, הרי הוא בעצם כופרת בתורה מן השמיים. ברם, הידיעה המודה בסודות. Now he says, look, but from orthodoxy says you've got to maintain belief in secrets and mystery. The extent to which they overcome the pshat is a problem we have to work out, okay? Now, but this is different. Even the Rambam, he says, Oto harationalistan agadol, lefi hashkafat hamaskilim. Even the Rambam, as we said, he was a champion of the maskilim, the great rationalist. He believed in secrets of the Torah. We read the Moreh Nevuchim. We heard about the secrets. The secrets are not secrets of the Kabbalah, but they are secrets of mystery. But then he says, whilst we believe in secrets, Elish אלה שמפקפקת בקדמות הזוהר אינה דעה כפרנית. Remember we talked about last week the Dardaim, and who is a kofar is a Dardai a kofar. Rabbi Herzog says clearly, somebody who doesn't believe that the Zohar is Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai is definitely not a kofar. שהרי באמת היו בתחילת הופעת הזוהר גאונים מופקים שפקפקו ויותר מפקפקו. When the Zohar appeared in the 13th century, we read, correct, everybody? We read those who said the Zohar is not Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. We did. Yes? ואולם בדורותינו, אלה, אחרי שכבר באו הארי הקדוש, והבית יוסף, והאלשיך הקדוש, but, he says, more recent rabbis all accept the Zohar as being Rashbi. The Ari HaKadosh, for example, Rabbi Yosef Karo, the mystic and the halakhist, and the Alshich HaKadosh. Once somebody's called a Kadosh, you can be sure they will be a Kabbalist. V'achronar Rabbeinu Eliyahu Gaon MiVilna, Gadol Achronim Zatzal Uchechad HaMea HaRishonim. The Gaon of Vilna was a Kabbalist, no question. And he is considered to be like a Rishon. That's his status in the yeshiva world and in the world of Psak Halacha. So what we do, says Rabbi Herzog, and this is the answer, we accept the opinion of the later scholars. This is called Hilchata Kebatrai. Okay? Is everybody with me on that? John, would you like to explain what Hilchata Kebatrai means?
When there is a subject which is discussed during many generations, we accept the rule according to the later authorities.
Exactly. So whilst there may be different views in the past, if I want to know whether I can use my dishwasher for milking and fleshing, I go to my rabbi in my era, and he's the one who's going to tell me what the law is. And the Gemara says that me Abaye v'Rava v'Elach, from the Amoraim Abaye Rava Hilchata Kebatrai. And to explain this, we can go to John of Salisbury and the cathedral at Chartres. So I'm going to have to interrupt. Michael Rosenfeld,
can I just make a comment?
Yeah, sure.
Can I just? Yeah, so that's interesting. You say we take the later authorities, but are there other occasions you say, oh, we have to go by the older authorities, and the newer authorities don't have a greater status than the older authorities? Isn't there a bit of a contradiction there?
The general rule, Harvey, is Hilchata Kebatrai. Okay? And we can cite many, many examples of that in Halakha. But the Batrai, the most recent rabbi, can say, you know what? I prefer the view of an authority who lived 300 years ago. That's fine. The point is, who has to say today? Now, I'm going to give you a mashal, which is used by the Tosafot Harid, Rabbi Isaiah Ditrani, but actually it is taken from medieval Christian authorities, particularly John of Salisbury, who was the leader of the 12th century Renaissance. Michael Rosenfeld, have you ever been to the city of Chartres?
No.
No. Well, go there and see the cathedral from the outside. Don't go in, okay? Now, what do we have on top of the roof or the parapet of the Grande Cathedrale in Chartres? We have the prophets, Moses, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Isaiah, Hosea, Malachi, Zephaniah, Obadiah, and who is sitting on their shoulders? The 12 apostles, the Havdil Elef Havdalot. What did John of Salisbury say in his Metalogicon? He said, how come that we agree that those in the past, Harvey, I hope you're listening, are greater than us, but nevertheless, we make decisions on the basis of what we think. How can that be? We all agree in religious circles that the farther back you are, the greater you are, correct? But yet, our local Orthodox rabbi, or not, makes the decision. So, the Tosafot Harid, who did that exactly, your question, Harvey, he preferred a later authority to the Shulchan Aruch. This is a din in mikvaot. I'm not going to go into it, in mikvahs. But he used the Tosafot HaRosh as opposed to the Shulchan Aruch. He says, Hilchata Kebatrai. He says, look, who sees father, a dwarf or a giant? Harvey, what's the answer? Who sees
Sorry,
father?
what was it? Oh, who sees father? What was the choices? A
Giant
dwarf or
or dwarf?
a giant?
Giant. Is that correct, Michael Rosenfeld? The giant. Correct? He
Yep.
sees farther than the dwarf. But what
No, the
happens when you put the dwarf on the
On the giant's
shoulders of the
shoulders.
giants? Who sees further?
The dwarf.
The dwarf. The dwarf.
The dwarf. So that's Hilchata Kebatrai. And this is explained by various rabbis and also medieval scholastics. What you have when you are a dwarf is a giant and you can sit on his shoulders. We have a learning of the past. You can see further because you are looking around in your time and seeing what's going on. So you're the best person to apply the learning of the past to the situation of the present. So what Rabbi Herzog is saying is that the most recent authorities seem to be in favor of the Zohar, and it is Rashbi. But then, of course, as usual, he contradicts himself or doesn't quite. And he says, however, כך אנו מקבלים את הביקורת של גאונים וצדיקים גאון רבי יעקב הנדל, רבי דוד לוריה ז"ל, על גוף הגרסאות, או בלעז על הטקסט של הזוהר. But once we accept that as a basic principle, we nevertheless are aware of the criticism of the text of the Zohar. It couldn't have all been written by Rashbi. Hence, sinu harbe prakim kemucharim. Rabbi Yaakov Emden, who is very from, Rabbi David Loria, who Rabbi Herzog cited, he's Peshli Shila Gaon Vilna. Loria, Radal. Okay, he is a authority, a student of the Gra. He says many texts in the Zohar could never have been written by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Hence, sinu harbe prakim, and there must be medieval. Shamati biyoti bachur tzayir mipi Hagon Rabbi Avraham Abba Verna Zal, harav shel Machziki Adas beLondon. Now, Rabbi Herzog, as I said, came to London in 1898, and he spent some time. And in the 1890s, in 1890, I think, somebody can correct me if I got this wrong, Machziki Adas was set up in London's East End by a group of from East Europeans who didn't like the chief rabbi, Hertz, or the way the United Synagogue in England was doing things, was far from being from enough, especially in the area of kashrus. So they brought over Rabbi Avraham Abba Verna, okay? Now, Avraham Abba Verna was certainly no mean rabbinical East European rabbinical authority at all, but he was he was the rabbi of the Mazik Adas after having come from Eastern Europe, and his father was the Av Bet Din of, anybody remember where?
No.
Okay. All right, Telz.
No.
He was the Av Bet Din of Telz. Do you think that was from enough? When his father died, Verna became the Av Bet Din, the chief dayan of Telz. Okay, so he was a Telzer. All right, and he became a chief rabbi of Finland, by the way. He went to Helsinki, chief rabbi of Finland, hoped he'd earn more money, but it really wasn't very frum for him. And then he came to the East End, accepted a call from the Machziki Adas, and was there for about 20 years. He was succeeded by Rav Kook. He died in 1912. In 1915 or 16, Rav Kook came to the Machziki Adas from Switzerland, where he'd been trapped. Swiss people, he'd gone to that good conference in St. Gallen. First World War broke out. Rav Kook was trapped in Switzerland. Nice place to be trapped, I guess. But he didn't last too long, and he left Switzerland, and he went to London. He was the rabbi until 1919, when he went back to what was the British mandate in Palestine. So I'm not going to talk too much about the Mazeki Adas, but that was where the young Herzog would have gone to daven. And what did Werner tell him? Now, Werner was not only a great Talmid Chacham, a Telza, and he was a Mukubal Muflag v'Chasid Nilhav Shel Agra. He was an absolute adherent of the Gra, and he was a Mukubal, Kabbalist. Shagra bebeiro al Zohar hu ha'mavaker hayoter kasher l'text shel Zohar. No harsher critic of the text of the Zohar than the Gra. As the Khatam Sofer said, I'm saying this for the third time, if we were to do a textual analysis of the Zohar, and we were to cut out all the things that could not possibly have been written by Rashbi or in his time, it would be a very, very, very small book. So what we have is two things here. Rav Herzog says, we in the frum world respect our most recent rabbis, who all claim that the Zohar is very holy. Kedushat Zohar, it has the spirit of Rashbi in it. At the same time, we are permitted to question the authenticity of most of the Zohar and put it down to later Kabbalists, especially the Spanish Kabbalists of the Middle Ages, the most prominent of whom was Rabbi Moshe de Leon. And in that way, we combine, if you like, the academic approach with the frum approach. Okay? Of course, you won't convince Orthodox Kabbalists of that, but we're not listening to them. We are reading Rabbi Herzog. Then he makes a very interesting comment indeed. Rabbi Herzog says, Bad bevadim zeh, line 39 after the three dots. En להתעלם מהעובדה שחוכמת המסתורין היא המוצא טעם בכל המצווה ממצוות התורה הקדושה, ומה שיכולה למצוא טעם עמוק ודאי שהיא שמחה בו. What do we want from Torah and Yiddishkeit? We want to feel uplifted, joyful, as if we're doing something important. If we do the mitzvot because that's the habit, and that's how we were brought up, and that's what dad or mum did, it doesn't have much time, okay? The Zohar gave us time. Now, you could go the way of Rambam and say Judaism is meant to be an intellectual challenge, intellectual across the board. Knowledge in general, Jewish knowledge, and philosophy, and theology. But that is exclusionist and elitist. What does the Kabbalah offer you? Everything you, as a Poshet Yid does, a simple Jew, becomes full of meaning, of mystery, of magic. You can change things. That's exciting. When you put on tefillin, you're doing something to change both this world and the next. And if you're a Chabadnik and you get a Jewish soul who doesn't keep a single thing, who knows nothing about Judaism, just to put on a pair of tefillin, that's exciting. It's changed the balance in the mystical realm. And we're going to start talking about the 10 Sfirot next on our syllabus. But you do things, and there's nothing like doing something important to make you feel important. And this is what Rabbi Herzog says, the tam, it gives you, as we say in Yiddish, esot tam. When you feel that things you're doing have an impact somehow on the higher world or connect you directly to God. Rambam's God is very distant, but the Zohar's God, as we'll learn, is here and now, right now, when you make a bracha, when you daven, when you do a mitzvah, when you shake a lulav. And you got to think about what it means and how you're connecting to God. It fills up your life and your time with thoughts and ideas, and the way you tie your shoes, and the right before the left, and whether you wear tefillin on Chol HaMoed or not. This gives you a life full. Now, you might say that fullness is not very positive, but Rabbi Herzog says, psychologically speaking, it made a great difference to the lives of regular and ordinary Jews, and hence Chassidut succeeded as well, because it made your regular, ordinary Jews feel important. Okay, so Rabbi Herzog says that ki matrata hi she'adam Yisraeli kaina mitzvot mitoch simcha pnimit v'zeh yakel harbei. It makes the mitzvot and religious life much more amenable if you know that there's going to be a secret meaning, tam story. And we all love fantasy. What can we do? We love Harry Potter. We just want to live a life where we have fantasies there, and we imagine ourselves as being much more powerful and much more potent and much more influencing the world than we really are. But Davka l'Rashbi matim chibur yesod shel chokhmat hasodot. Then Rabbi Herzog says, you know what? If we were to try and find someone to stick this onto, who would be our hero of secrets of Torah in the Tanaitic tradition? Rashbi. He was in the cave 12 years, another 12 years. What was he doing? Clearly was engaged in mysteries. He was also the student of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva went into the Pardes, which is Pshat, Remez, Drash, and Sod, secret, came out unscathed. Rabbi Akiva is the one who says that out of every time crown on the letter of the Torah, there are tilei tilin shel halachot. Rabbi Akiva is mystical. Rabbi Ishmael says, Dibrat Torah kelashon bnei adam. What do you want? Torah speaks to us, we have to understand it as human beings. Rabbi Akiva says, no, everything is omnisignificant, significant on many levels. So it goes back to Tanaitic rabbinic Judaism, the tension between the two. So if we're going to look for a mystical hero of the Tanait, it might as well be Rashbi, okay? Might as well be him. And therefore we load it all onto, he cites the Gemara in Melachot, where Rabbi Akiva is teaching Torah, and Moshe Rabbeinu is sitting at the end row. Jean, does Moshe Rabbeinu understand the Shiur?
No, not at all.
Not at all,
When he
not a
heard
word.
that Rabbi Akiva referred to Moshe Rabbeinu, then he was, comment on dit?
And when Rabbi Akiva says, the halakha la Moshe mi Sinai, Moshe is happy, but he has no idea how his halakha translates into Rabbi Akiva's sophistications and complexities and even mystical thoughts. Rabbi Akiva says Shir Hashirim is Kodesh Kodashim. Forget all the physical references. This has always been the tension in rabbinic Judaism. Now, the last bit I'm going to cite, just because this is, by the way, Rabbi Herzog was very urbane, and after he became chief rabbi of Israel in 1937, he went to London for the Peel Commission. And remember, what cover paper did the Peel Commission produce?
White paper.
A white paper.
Oh,
And Rabbi Herzog was in London when the white paper came out. Do you remember what he did publicly? He tore the white paper up and was published in the newspapers. And his son, Chaim Herzog, did the same thing when?
In the UN, the Zionism.
1975 at the UN, Zionism and racism. Herzog got up and said, I'm doing my father's thing, tearing it up.
Masoret, minhag mishpacha.
Exactly. And when Rabbi Herzog wanted to, this is 1939, 1940, 45, he was in America. When he wanted to go back to Palestine, okay, 1945, they said in America, Rabbi Herzog, stay here. The Nazis, Rommel, they're in Libya. Palestine will fall, the Jews will be exterminated. What did Rabbi Herzog say? Habayit hashlishi lo yipol. We have a tradition. Bayit Rishon, Bayit Sheni, but the Bayit Shlishi. As far as I'm concerned, he said this is Bayit Shlishi, and he went back. And he was, of course, right through the war. And after the war, he went to Europe, and he tried to convince the Pope to release all the Jewish orphans who'd been taken in monasteries. And the Pope gave him the cold shoulder. So he went from monastery to monastery trying to rescue. He rescued over 500 Jewish orphans. By the way, Rabbi Dr. Solomon Schonfeld in England did something very similar. I assume some of you have heard of Dr. Schonfeld, but he also went on a trip. But he didn't simply speak to the Mother Superior or the abbot. he went into the courtyard of the monastery and cried out. He had a very big, huge voice, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. And from all corners of a nunnery in which the Mother Superior had sworn on her honor there wasn't a single Jewish child, came Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. So this was Rabbi Herzog. So let's read from line 4. That was Schoenfeld, but Herzog was the pioneer. He went from town to town, place to place, searching for Jewish orphans who'd been deposited by their parents who were all murdered in nunneries and in monasteries. Toda la'el, line 4. Shezachinu limidinat Israel. This is written after the establishment of the state. He was the first Ashkenazi chief rabbi of the state, together with Rabbi Meir ben Sion Chai Uziel. Balfei korbanot banenu uvenotenu. The thousands of our sons and daughters who've fallen to fight for this state. Yizkareim Eloheinu im tzadikei olam. And this is so opposite to our times too. May they be remembered by God with the righteous of the world. May it be the will before the one who dwells in Zion. Habocher b'Yerushalayim, sheyare ruach tara mimarom. The spirit of purity will come down from heaven. Ruach shel emunah Torah Rama niskava. Hakadosh Baruch Hu v'Torato hakadosh v'nera kumu Yehudei Nevi'im Israel. U'la'olam kulo al ruach Yisrael Saba shitorer. Yitzchak Isaac Halevi Herzog, Rosh HaRabbanim Israel, Hachoneh po ir HaKodesh Yerushalayim, Tibaneh v'tikoneh. So that's my last word on how we should deal with the problem of authenticity of the Zohar. I think Rabbi Herzog says some interesting things. Anybody who wants to make a comment is more than welcome. Just speak.
Well, firstly, what he says about Zohar is about the 10% which is supposed to be authentic, or about also the 90% which were added during the Middle Ages?
I think he agrees that 10% is fine. You can believe that. The most important thing is to take the idea of what the Zohar stands for and apply it. In other words, forget who the author was. Not really important, okay? The spirit of Rashbi, if you like, merachefet al pnei Zohar, okay? But you don't have to accept that. But you have to look at the Zohar as giving us an opportunity to enrich our Jewish practice. Make it richer. Give it a bit of mystery, a bit of excitement, a bit of something that makes it full of tam, okay? Not just mitzvot anashim melumada. If you like, it's the way of Abraham as opposed to the way of Aristotle. Rambam's way is very hard. Most of us are not dedicated intellectuals. Most of us do not get huge pleasure out of study and learning. Some of us do, okay? But majority of us really don't. And therefore, Rabbi Herzog says, look at the Zohar and the Kabbalah, something that you dip into for a little inspiration, perhaps. It does add to the religious experience from a phenomenological point of view, from a point of view of phenomenology. But you don't need to accept the authenticity of the Zohar, except for a very small bit. You are not a kofar, you're just fine, but you should accept that the levels of meaning in the Torah, all of them have a place. The tamhil, how we mix these different parts, I think depends upon one's personality. Those who tend to a more intellectual approach, gesund hate. Those who want to do things at the same time, there are dangers in both. And the thing is always to draw the right line, and that's what we're going to talk about as well. You can go overboard, okay, on the intellectual and become a maskil. You go overboard on the mystical and become shabtai tzvi. It's always a matter of the bounds, the boundary, and the correct pivotal point that separates extremism from a principled, middle-of-the-road position, which is the golden mean.
Do we know to what degree Rabbi Herzog did believe in what the Zohar says?
Rabbi Herzog never wrote on Kabbalah, and he doesn't use Kabbalah, okay? And the fact is that he spent a lot of his time writing doctoral theses, okay? What he says, though, I think, is a general feeling that your average Orthodox rabbi across the board would have. It's important, it's there, but I am not going to spend my time in it to any great extent. Now, everybody does cite Zohar somewhere or the other. Halachis, because as we'll see, the Bet Yosef Rabbi Yosef Karo incorporated Zohar into his halacha. If you open the Mishnah Brura, you'll see bits of the Zohar, and we'll probably kick off with the Mishnah Brura, who gives us a way of analyzing which bits of Zohar can be accepted as halacha and which not. In other words, it would be, if you like, one phrase, sympathetic acceptance. Okay? I'm sympathetic. But Rabbi Herzog spent almost all of his life either in intellectual activities or in halakha, study of Tanakh. And as you can feel from what he said about there must be a plain meaning to the text, he's not that happy in turning historical accounts in the Tanakh into secrets of the Kabbalah. Okay? So it's always a matter of where you place the boundary. Any more?
Minchat Shai writes explicitly that when there is a contradiction between the halacha and the Zohar, we do according to the Gemara. This seems not completely accepted by the Batrai, by the
Kabbalist.
Later authorities.
Yes.
Yeah.
And secondly, I wanted to see.
But just before you continue, Jean, if what happens if there's no contradiction, but the Zohar thing that the Talmud doesn't deal with at all, what then?
He didn't speak about the Mincha.
I know, but I'm going to speak about that and the Mishnah Brura and the Knesset Agdolah and a whole range of Poskei Halacha talk about that. We will also we'll talk about that at great length after we've learned some Zohar, which is next. We're going to learn some Zohar just to give you a taste of what it's all about. But the issue is not so much, more or less everybody agrees. Even Radal and Rabbi Yitzchak Chaver, Gaon of Vilna says, of course, the Gemara says X, and the Zohar contradicts it, we follow the Gemara. That's very clear. And what happens if there's no direct contradiction? What happens if you want to make your religious life richer by putting in a few Zoharic details? For example, Nagelwasser. You know what Nagelwasser is?
Yeah.
That's Zohar. No basis for it in halakha at all. But how many people are makpid of a little basin with a matlar by their bed? They won't walk 4 amot without washing 3 times. And when you come out of the bet kvarot, or if women, according to the Zohar, should not come into the graveside, all sorts of, and I can start, if I start, I will not finish now.
And Rambam would certainly oppose the Nagelwasser because Rambam did not
Exactly. And there are some of us who do. And we say enough that you do a wash once at some stage, okay, before you go into shul or whatever, first thing in the morning, but not 3 times, not the basin by the bed and all of that. But many of us remember that from our childhoods. I don't know whether anybody here was given a little basin and a pitcher next to their bed. Nagel, but I mean, nagel, of course, means nails. It's the mystical idea of what the hair and nails stand for. And it's not only Jewish, it's all over the East. I mean, if you get me started on this, I won't finish for another 3 hours. So let's just get back and see if there are any more questions at this stage or comments. Or is it Shtika kahoda adami. Everybody agrees with every word I said, so therefore we can continue.
No,
I want
no,
Rabbi Yosef Kapar is apparently the model of Dardani.
I said that last week. His grandfather, Yichya Kapich, was the founder of the Dardai movement. He
But
came here and he basically was the head of the Dardaim, which is why he translated the Moreh Nevuchim and why he wrote on Rav Sadia Gaon. Okay, but he was much more mellow and soft than his grandfather.
But he was nevertheless one of the Dayanim in the Beit
The Din Rabbani Gadol. He was a tremendous.
And at the same time, the Rav Mordechai Eliyahu. Donc there were such things that he should be a heretic.
Ruth, I know you got upset by that last time, 100%. Mordechai Eliyahu is a typical sort of Shasi type, Sephardi posek, lots of halakha, but a lot of Kabbalah, and a lot of things that are part of the mystical tradition. But Rav Ovadia was much less intimidated, right? So, you know, at the end of the day, as many of these things do, it boils down to personalities. Correct? Bernard?
Yep.
Personality of a judge is as much as the importance as the law, right?
Correct.
Absolutely. We are all legal realists now, and we know that personality of the posek is as important as what is in the letter of the law. Okay, so let's see if we can start.
Can I make one more comment?
Absolutely, Jack. The floor is yours.
I'm not convinced that the dwarf that is sitting on the shoulders of the giant can see further than the giant, because the capacity of seeing, or the sense of seeing, the dwarf may be much more impaired or cannot see as far to begin with as the giant. So even if he sits on his shoulders, he may not be able to see so far. And if that's the case, then I question why, if we are more inclined to follow the Achronity, the later interpreters, then why do we still keep today? We keep 2 days of Yom Tov instead of 1 in the Dayan.
Okay, all right. That's a whole. It's not okay. Fine. The parable.
You don't have to answer it now because the time is short.
Time basically is gone. So I might as well answer the question, because we come to a natural division, because the next shiur could be about the 10 Sfirot, okay? We don't need to start that because we only have a few minutes anyhow. So let me address this very important issue. I think I'm going to close the share screen. We'll start our Kabbalah for real next time in Yirtzeh Hashem next week. Take you into Sefirot and all of those Malchut, Netzach, Hod, Tiferet, and all of that, and the Olam Atzilut, Bria, etc. But let me take this point up that Jack has raised. The parable of the dwarfs on the shoulders of giants is a parable. It's a mashal. And it's there really to say that we respect the past. That's the point. We respect the past. Moshe Rabbeinu, Nevi'im, Zkenim, Tanaim, Amoraim. But at the same time, when it comes to making a practical decision, we, generation now, have to take the responsibility. And by the way, from a biological perspective, I think giants don't see that well. Remember, Goliath, he couldn't follow David's stone at all. Giantism is associated. Marcel, do you have anything to tell us?
Yeah, it affects the chiasm, the optic chiasma. And so the part of the brain, the optic nerve goes past that part of the brain that swells if you're a giant and stretches the optic nerve. And that's why
They may have impaired vision.
There you are.
Don't they?
Giants have impaired
Okay.
vision. Dwarfs
Yes,
actually see better. And that may, in fact, even make the parable stronger, because the dwarf looks around and sees things very sharply. The giant's view is blurred, but he's a giant still. A lot of stuff in his head. So, we ask for his wisdom. We take the wisdom of the past, but nevertheless, we want a posek halakha today who can see what's going on around us and make the right application of halakha to the situation. Okay?
Wasn't it Isaac Newton who
Isaac Newton
said,
also
if I
knew-
have seen farther, it is because I have stood on the shoulders of giants.
Absolutely. Bernie, you're 100% correct.
So the father's view is the giant on the shoulders of a giant.
And the guy who collected all of these parables, by the way, as I said, it's actually John of Salisbury, who was part of the 12th century Renaissance, which was centered with Saint Bernard of Chartres, okay? 11th century Renaissance, actually, at Chartres. And not only Isaac Newton, but I could give you a whole slew of famous names who use this idea. Who is the famous American sociologist? A.I. Merkin. Merkin wrote a book called On the Shoulders of Giants. So if you look at the book, Bernie, you'll see all of them. But Isaac Newton is one of the most famous. You're absolutely spot on. Okay? So was a very useful idea. And as I said, the Rid, Rabbi Shai Ditrani, ported it into halakha when he wrote a tshuva in which he preferred the Tosafot HaRosh, which is possibly attributed to the Rosh, on the laws of mikvaot as opposed to the Shulchan Aruch, to a psak halakha mufareshet in the Shulchan Aruch, to allow a community to use a mikvah that was somewhat dubious. So this is the idea, that we have much learning of the past and we respect the past. Now, there's a difference, Jack, between the Sephardim and the Ashkenazim. Ashkenazim are much more inclined to follow the Hilchot Kabatrai, whereas the Sephardim are much more prone to stick to the past. How did Rabbi Yosef Karo decide he was going to paskin like? He has the opening trio, the opening three, thinking about basketball, a short jump from that to football, okay? His opening trio is the Rambam, the Rosh, and the Rif. Then he has the 5 field men in the middle, okay? That's the Ramban and the Smag and the Mordechai. So he has a very set system of greats. The Ramah, Rabbi Moshe Isserles, says Hilchot Kabatrai, and therefore I am as influential as any great rabbi in the past. Ashkenazim, therefore, tended to be a little more dynamic, both for making things easier, but also, Jack, for making things harder. Because often, if you follow the most recent authority, their heads are full of Humras, Kabbalah, and they can make life very difficult for you. Whereas you take a good old Sephardi Rav, who just reads the Rambam and the Bet Yosef, he'll give you a fairly reasonable psak and make your life easier. But both sides are there in the rabbinic tradition, and they have something special to contribute. The last minute, second day Yontef. Well, the Gemara in Beit Sa, as you well know, says minhag avoteinu biyadein. Not a psak halacha, it's a minhag. A minhag that goes back a long time. Minhag mevatel halacha. And therefore, though it makes not the slightest sense to keep a second day, because you don't know the day of Yontef, we do know exactly. We've been using calendars that tell us the precise day for years and years, and any more information on the calendar, speak to Jean, okay, who's an expert on calendric calculations, all right? But minhag avotenu biyadein was accepted as being a minhag, and therefore a minhag, because minhagim can be more important than dinim. You're wearing a kippah, okay? Kippah is a minhag, not a din at all. But which Orthodox Jewish male would dream of not picking up a kippah if it fell? And we take out kippot anywhere and everywhere, okay? Minhag mevatel halacha was felt to be a minhag, Also, of course, the rabbis liked a second day of Yom Tov because you did more davening, listened to more droshes, and ate more. That kept the kashrut going, keeps the shul full, and keeps you in line for another day. And if you have 3 days, that's even better. So you in Switzerland will enjoy 3 days of Yirtzeh Hashem this year, Rosh Hashanah and Sukkot. We in Israel, only one, but there we are. A reason for coming on Aliyah. Next week we begin the Zohar itself, and we'll do that for a bit. Then we'll go into the Zohar influencing halakha, and we'll see what happens in the summer. In the meantime, I will conclude as always with a good evening. B'sorot tovot.
Mhm.
Good luck to whichever team you are supporting. Bye for now.
Thank you.